Hey everybody, welcome back to Harmon Garage. I'm Aaron, and it's another cold, rainy day here in Alabama. Seems to be the new thing. It's rained just about every day, and it's been pretty cold just about every day. So I've got a lot of projects I can do, but most of them I want to do, or I'm going to do outside. I still got cherry pie here that I need to keep going on. But the next step with that is finishing, assembling everything in the engine compartment, and all that requires painting, and it's too cold and too wet to paint. So the truck gathering, if you're new to the channel, you may not have heard about it yet, but I mentioned it before. It's a truck show that's going on in Norman, Oklahoma on April 15th, and I'm actually sponsoring the show. I just found out yesterday or the day before that they sold out all the spots. It's the first year for the show. Some buddies of mine putting it on, and I'm super excited for them for being able to sell out the first year, and I think it's really cool. But I'm gonna be there April 15th, Norman, Oklahoma at Landers Chevrolet for the truck gathering. Spectators are free. You don't have to pay to park, you don't have to pay to get in, nothing. Like I said, there's no more truck spots, so you can't register for it, but spectators are free. If you want to come see me, there's going to be a couple other YouTubers there that I know about, and there's going to be a ton of truck related vendors. So if you get a chance, check that out. I wanted to bring that up to make sure you guys have heard about it or know about it, and also because I'm building this truck right behind you to take to that show. With that being said, it does not look like it's ready for a 9.5 hour drive to Norman, Oklahoma to go to the show. So for those of you that are new, this is a 91 Chevy C1500. Was originally a 4.3 V6 with an MV3500, 5-speed manual transmission. It still has the MV3500. The 4.3 has been replaced by a 355 that's probably way too much for this truck just to be a driver like I want it to be. There's a bunch of old videos on this truck. I lowered the front end, I lowered the back, but the back's not low enough, so I'm gonna do a whole bunch of stuff back there. I don't want to do that right now because I just got done doing a video lowering cherry pie over here, and I don't want to just slam you with rear suspension drops over and over and over again. So I've got the interior completely stripped out. The dash was obliterated. I got a new dash for it. I'm putting a custom one off, make it myself wiring harness in the entire truck. The last thing I have to take off for the interior is the door panels. I've got a couple little projects I'm gonna do today just to be here at the shop and be productive and make some progress on this truck, which is pretty much the biggest thing. But I'm having a hard time finding new door panels. The rest of the interior, I already got a new dash. I got new seats, some seats that I want to put in it. I don't think I've showed you guys those yet, but we'll get to that when we go to put the interior back together. And I've got dash, I've got everything for the interior except door panels, and I'm having a hard time finding some decent ones. So if you have any gray manual window 88 to 92 Chevy door panels in good shape, let me know, because I could really use them. If not, I'll figure something else out. That's not a top priority. I still got to get it running and all that stuff, but first thing I'm going to do is take the door panels off. That way they're out of the way, and then I'll start doing some other stuff to the truck. All right, like I said, there isn't going to be one big project in this video like usual. I'm kind of just taking today to knock out a bunch of little stuff on old Rumrunner here so that I can make some progress with it. And I've just got parts I've collected, and why they're all sitting there and it all needs to be done, I figured I'll just do it. So it's just going to be a bunch of little here and there and everywhere. But first thing I'm going to do, I got the door panels off on both sides. I don't like these mirrors. I'm trying to give the truck kind of a sporty look, but be an old rough shop truck at the same time. And those mirrors just aren't working for me. So I've got these mirrors here. I bought them probably a year ago or better. And they've been riding around in the bed with all the other parts. I just haven't gotten them on the truck. So I'm gonna go ahead and slap those on first. 3 bolts in here to take this mirror off. That new mirror bolt's in the factory location, same way. Biggest problem with doing these mirrors is this nut up here is, you have to use an open end wrench to get to it. You can't get a socket in there. And if you're careful, if you're not careful, even if you're careful, they usually fall down in the door. And these aren't the cool doors that have the holes where you can reach inside of them. The whole regulator mechanism's all attached to this metal bracket here. So you gotta be really careful. I'm gonna go ahead and get those mirrors swapped out real quick and show you guys what they look like. And then we'll figure out what we're gonna do next. All right, I'm putting this mirror on. And I wanted to show you guys this because I'm an idiot and I think it's funny. So I got the new mirror up there and started putting the nuts on it. There's one down there. And then I went to tighten them down. I thought I started them all and I went to tighten them down and I went to looking and there's no nut on that stud right there. So I was like, crap, it must have dropped it down in the door or something. I don't know what. I found it. I put 2 nuts on that top bolt and actually tightened it down. So I thought it was kind of funny. I'm kind of dumb, but I figured I'd show you guys. But I'm gonna go ahead and get that off and get it in the right spot. Finish up putting the mirrors on. I'll show you guys when I'm done. All right, I got the mirrors put on. I'm not gonna say I'm a huge fan of the mirrors themselves. They're probably gonna be pretty hard to see out of, but I like the streamline look. Looks good. Happy with that. Got those knocked out pretty quick. Wasn't a big deal. And then I came over here. I was having to open and close the door and stuff, messing with the mirror. And it was ticking me off because this door handle on this side was never here. It never had a door handle on the driver's side since I got the truck. So I had a buddy that's got a bunch of OBS trucks that he parts out, get me a door handle, and I've had it sitting in the bed for months. I'm talking a lot of months. And I just never put it in because I was working on the suspension, I was working under the hood. I had the doors open the whole time I took the interior out and all that, so it never really bothered me. Well, when I had to open and close the door to walk around it and work on it and everything else, it really started irritating me. So I went and dug through my parts pile, found the door handle, and said, oh crap, I don't have the rod that goes between the handle and the latch. So luckily, I looked down in the door and boom, there it was. Then I commenced to spending 2 hours trying to figure out what kind of catastrophe, mess, whatever somebody else had done in here and what had happened to make that door handle fit and function like it's supposed to. It's still not perfect. Dang it, come on. You can see somebody had just put holes in the cab and I'm guessing put some kind of latch there to hold the door shut. There's a dent right here that I might be able to push out a little bit from the inside. And this doesn't look like it fits great. The mounting point for the back of the handle was bent completely over and back. I had to get that all straight. I had to hammer and dolly it a little bit to try to get it where it needed to be. And then the rod that I found down in the door was all twisted and bent out of whack and couldn't get the door handle to go in right, and I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. So I ended up going and taking the passenger side door handle out to see what was wrong with it, what I was doing wrong or whatever, and it turned out that that rod was all mangled. So I lined it up with the other rod, straightened it all out so everything was, so it was exactly the same bends and everything, just opposite. And Now for the first time in over a year, well, the dang needs door pins, but you get the point. Door opens. Door closes. I can fine tune that a little bit later, but now it does what it's supposed to do. So happy about that. Both doors work. Mirrors look pretty cool, I guess. So I'm kind of trying to decide what I'm gonna do next. All right, well, I know this video is seeming kind of boring, and yeah, it is. I'm just trying to do a bunch of little stuff on this truck that I need to get done, and I figure since I'm working on something, I'd film it for you guys. So yesterday afternoon, when I was filming, I went ahead and got the whole heater box put back together, figured out how it worked, all that stuff. And I'm gonna have to run all 3 blend door motors because one switches from floor to vent, one switches from outside air to inside air, and one switches from AC to heat. So I'm gonna have to be able to have the AC to heat one working so I can turn the heat off and it's not blowing heat in the cab when I don't have it on. I need the fresh air option or the recirc option, and I don't need to be able to switch it from floor to vent. I could just put the heater on the floor, but I don't want to leave that motor out and have that door stick to where I don't want it. So I'm gonna figure out the wiring schematic on all that. I'm gonna wire all 3 motors back in. Everything will probably work better with the factory switches and whatnot. So I've got it here. I've got it all put back together. I cleaned the inside of it out before I assembled it. I'm gonna go ahead and grab some cleaner and a rag and wipe the outside down the best that I can and get it stuffed back in there. Okay, heater box is all back in. As you saw, I got it in there. While I was in there, I went ahead and pulled out both sun visors and the headliner. Headliner's starting to separate and it's nasty and moldy and everything else, and that's something I can buy the material pretty cheap and cover it myself, so it's not a big expense. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna try my best to recover the visors myself, and I'll film all that for you guys down the road when we get to that point. So the heater box is back in, so I can wire it all up. I don't know if I want to put the dash in yet because I think I want to try to get as much of the wiring done as I can with the dash out and just kind of leave wiring for the dash. But we'll have to see. I've really honestly been putting off wiring this thing because I know it's going to be a big project and it's probably going to take me a solid week of every day, all day to get it done. And I need to get it done because I need to get this truck done, but I just don't really have time to dedicate to that right now. So I'm gonna try to spice this video up for you guys a little bit. I told you I have to lower the rear end more because the front's a lot lower than the back. And if you didn't see the old videos, I took the front spring hangers off the chassis and raised them up 2 inches and remounted them. And then I put the 2-inch shackles in the back. So that should have been, or that was 4 inches. Now I took 3 to 3.5 inches out of the front because I was gonna do a 3/4 drop, which I was hoping would make it pretty level. But as you can see by the rocker, it's not level at all. So my solution to that problem is gonna be flipping the axle in the back. Now, since I raised the front spring hangers 2 inches, and I have the drop shackles on there, that's already 4. So if I flip the axle, that's gonna give me like, you usually get 4 to 5 inches of drop from flipping the axle. And So let's say 4.5 just to average it out, plus the 4 that I already did, that's 8.5 inches of drop in the back. And I think that's gonna be way too much. And as you can see, if you look over there, obviously the bump stop's still in there, but between the spring and the frame here, there's not even hardly room for the axle to be there right now. So by the time you figure you put the weight of the bed and stuff back on the back, we'd have to like do an actual notch to get that to fit. And it would be lower than the front, which I don't want. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the shackles, the drop shackles off the back, put the stock shackles back on. That'll bring me up, raise it back up 2 inches, and then I'm gonna flip the axle, which should lower it 4.5. Hopefully I can just do the normal notch like I do on the square bodies in the frame here. And hopefully it'll level out with the front. If not, I might have to do some more stuff, but that's the plan. That's what I'm hoping for. So I wasn't gonna start this project right now, but it needs to get done, and why hold off on it? So I'm gonna get this thing, and I need to get the front jacked up too, because I gotta run my fuel system. I gotta change the transmission mount, because when I put the transmission in, I put a new one in, but I didn't realize the stud on it was metric, and I went to put a standard nut on it and I broke the mount. So mistake on my part, but I need to have it up. I need to do the transmission mount. I need to run my fuel system. I need to figure out what I'm gonna do for exhaust. I'd like to run a Y pipe and with a single exhaust coming out the passenger side, because the fuel tank's on that side, and that's just kind of the look I want. I'd like to bring it through the side of the bed if there's availability to do that. And I need to put the drive shaft in, but I can't put the drive shaft in. Oh, I could put it in the transmission, but there's really no point in putting the drive shaft in until I have the rear end where it's gonna be. Hopefully it's not too low and I don't have to shorten it, but we'll see. But in the meantime, I'm gonna get set up. Luckily, these bump stops bolt on, so I can just grab a wrench and bust those off. I'm gonna take my shocks off. I'm actually gonna take my shock mounts off because I'm changing all that up. I'm gonna have dual shocks in the rear. I got some adjustable shocks, not to make it race car or anything like that, just because I already have the shocks. I can set them where they need to be for the lowered thing, and I like the way they ride better when you have both shocks at the back. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'll get set up and I'll start stripping all this stuff off the back, and we'll see what happens. All right, got this thing all set up on jack stands. Got the rear tires off just to make everything go a little smoother. And I'm not really doing this in the order that needs to be done, because I'm taking the bump stops off right now, and really they don't need to come off for a while. But I'm gonna go ahead and get these off. I gotta drop the shocks. I gotta disconnect the brake lines, and then I'll get this rear end dropped out of here. Pretty much got everything stripped off this rear end that I needed to get stripped down, and gonna keep moving on. I'm gonna go ahead and get this axle dropped out of here, drop my hangers, my shackles, get a jack underneath it, set it on the floor, and then because of the way this is configured, it's not like the square bodies. Square bodies, you'd have your U-bolt plate on top of the spring with your bolts up here, where these are underneath. So another thing I haven't mentioned yet is this is gonna be a little bit different than the other ones that I've done, because I didn't buy axle flip brackets or axle flip cups, whatever you wanna call them, for this truck. I just bought spring perches. So I'm doing this one. Sorry, I'm not looking at you guys, but I'm trying to find the purchase so I can show you. I know I got them right here somewhere, but well, I'll find them in a minute and show you. But I'm gonna do this. It's basically the cheapest route possible you can do it. I think I paid $20 for both Good Metal Moroso brand perches. And I'm gonna take this rear end out and we're gonna take it outside, and I'm gonna cut all the spring perches, all the shock mounts, everything off this rear end. And then we're gonna bring it back in and mock it up in the truck on the springs and everything else. And then well, just hang in there and I'll show you what I'm doing. But for right now, I'm gonna drop the rear end out. I'm gonna drag it outside, clean it up, cut it up, and then we'll move on from there. Well, you guys can't really see nothing because of the way the sun in the shade is, and I know this because I can't really see nothing because of the way the sun in the shade is. But I got my rear end outside and it's a little bit heavier than I thought it was, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to flip it over to take the U-bolts off. But anyways, forgot what I was talking about. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to flip it over to take the U-bolts off, but I'm going to get them off one way or another. So we'll figure out how we're gonna do that. If I can't, I might be able to just put the jack under them, jack them up high enough to get my impact under there on the bolts and pop them loose. And if that doesn't work, I might just cut them, because I'm thinking I'm probably gonna use the square body style plates and U-bolts and mount it different. So I might just cut them off. But in the meantime, I did a little bit more digging. I found the spring perches that I bought that I'm going to use. And so we're going to get all of that stuff, all the old spring perches, all the old shock mounts, all that stuff cut off of that rear end. And then we're going to put these in there. So I'm going to, once I get the rear end all cut off and cleaned up, I'm gonna go and hang the springs back in the truck with the rear end. I'll set my perches under the rear end, get my springs underneath them, on top of it. You get the picture. I'm gonna mock it up in the truck, and then I can set my pinion angle and all that kind of stuff, and then I'll tack weld them in there. And then I'll pull the rear end back out. Oh, that sounds like a lot of work. One way or another, I'm gonna get it mocked up. I'm gonna tack the shackles in place at the right angle and all that stuff. And then I'll pull it back out or get up in there the best I can or whatever, and solid weld these perches onto that axle so that it can't rotate. And then then we'll stick it all back in there, and that should be it. Sounds easy, right? Just nothing to it, just do it. But it's gonna be a little bit of work. But anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and start working on getting those U-bolts and springs off of there and move on to the next part. got my springs off. Next thing I'm going to do is pull my brake lines, because I'm going to be cutting right next to them, and I don't want to mess them up because I don't want to have to buy new ones. So I'm going to take them off and get them out of the way so they don't get damaged. And yeah, and then we'll start cutting all this stuff up and see how it goes. This truck has got to be the muddiest thing I've ever worked on. I don't even know. It's two-wheel drive short bed. I mean, it's not like it was a mud truck or something. Maybe they were using it on a farm. I don't know. But I pressure washed this truck at least twice, and it's still covered in mud. Okay, this probably is not the best method for doing this, and if you're not comfortable using a torch, I would advise against it, because if you cut into this axle tube, this rear end is basically ruined. So I'm pretty comfortable with a torch, and I don't want to waste a bunch of cut-off wheels trying to get all this off, and this is going to be the quickest way for me to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and take the torch. I'm not going to try to cut through the weld and get right against the axle tube. I'm going to stay a little bit above the weld, trim it off, and then I'll come back with a grinder and grind it down smooth. Now I want to be careful taking these shock mounts off, because even though I'm relocating the shocks, I'm probably still going to use these mounts, because why not? I already got them. So they're going to be shorter, they're going to be up against the axle more, so I'm not hurting anything by cutting them off out here, because I'm going to cut more of it off before I weld them back on anyways. So I'm going to go ahead and get the shock mounts off. I'm going to get the spring purchase cut off. Now, if you take your time and do a good job cutting the spring purchase off, you can clean them up and reuse them. I didn't go that route because I went down to Sibley's and bought a set for 20 bucks. So I have new ones. I'll probably keep these old ones, if not to use on a different rear end, just to use as scrap metal for some kind of other project or whatever. So I'm going to somewhat take my time cutting them off to get them off clean, and so I don't damage the tube. But I've been talking enough, so let's just get it done. I got everything cut off, got everything ground down, and I just wanted to tell you guys, this isn't sponsored or an ad or anything like that, but These things here are called fiber discs. They got this rubber backer that you put on there, and then it's just a disc that screws on the front. I'd seen them on other channels and didn't know what they were. I'd never heard of them before, and I went to the store one day and seen them, and I was like, oh, they ain't terribly expensive. I'm gonna go ahead and try them out. That is the cat's meow. I mean, I don't think I'll ever buy a flapper wheel or a grinding disc again. This is one disc, and I ground everything off this rear end with this one disc, and it's still got life left in it. I mean, it's amazing to me, because grinding disc and flapper disc don't last near that long, especially grinding through 1/4-inch thick metal and all the welds it was holding on it and everything else. So very, very impressed with the fiber disc. This is 60 grit also, so I mean, they have like 24 and 36 grit, which should have cut that faster, but I just bought 60 just to try it, and it really did a good job, and it made quick work of it. I bet you I was only grinding for about 30-40 minutes for the whole thing, and it was done. And just a little kind of stupid thing here. I was thinking about it while I was grinding, and this old DeWalt grinder I got here, an old man that was a contracted welder for the company that I worked for way back when, gave me this grinder. Hell, it had to have been probably 20 plus years ago, because it started making a little bit of rattling noise when you put it on some load, and he was worried that it was gonna burn up on him, so he went and bought a new one and gave me that one, because I was young at the time and I didn't even have one. So he gave it to me and said, here, this will get you started, and you know, when you get a little bit of money set aside or whatever, you can go buy a new one, yada yada yada. 20 plus years later, that old thing's still ticking, and I beat it up a lot. Use it all the time, not easy on it, and it's still going. So that's American made quality right there. But enough of the nonsense. Like I said, I got this all ground down. Next thing I'm gonna do, I got my DA here with some 80 grit paper on it. I'm just gonna go back and kind of smooth that out everywhere that I ground, and clean the rust and stuff off the rear end all the way around, because where I'm going to be welding the shock mounts and the new spring seats on there isn't the same location they were welded before, so I'm going to need good clean metal to weld to in different spots. So I'm just going to, probably from about the inner shock mount where I had to start grinding stuff down out to here somewhere, I'm just gonna go ahead and clean that whole area up real good. I'm not worried about cleaning up the whole rear end and painting it or nothing like that, because it's gonna be a daily driver shop truck, so it don't have to be full custom ride on a trailer show truck quality. I'm gonna sand it down to where I can do what I need to do. I'm gonna mount it back in the truck, and I'll probably just shoot some paint over the bare metal just so it don't rust bad, but I'm not gonna clean the whole rear end up and paint it or nothing like that. So I'm gonna plug my air line into my DA, go out there, get that all smoothed out and ready to go, and then we'll be ready to bring that rear end back in here and hang it in the truck. Okay, I got that all sanded down, ready to go, and ready to take back in there and hang under the truck. But first, I have to check a few things and make sure they're gonna work. So I've already decided that I am not, I've already decided I'm not gonna use the U-bolts and brackets that came off of this truck. I've got a couple sets of square body ones sitting over there on the shelf, and I like the design better, and I think they'll give me some more room. So I'm going to use those instead, as long as they all fit. But first, before I can even start to hang anything back in the truck, I have to make sure that these brackets that I bought are going to work. And by that I mean, I'm gonna take them, set them on there, and as you can see, we got the perfect radius. It's sitting on there perfect. Now, the thing that I'm concerned about is this has to sit on top of this, which it goes over the stud, but it does not go over the nut. And what we're gonna have to do is cut this stud off flush with that nut so that the nut, or the bolt part, the stud, doesn't hit the rear end when it's in the cradle. So when it was up there before, it had the stud end of the bolt, and that doesn't even fit. But so even if I took this off and turned it around, which is, you know, if you want to call it the right way to do it, it still isn't going to fit. So I need to find out how much bigger I need the hole in this to be to fit over that nut. And then I'll drill these out a little bit bigger. And actually, I'm not even going to do that. If you guys watched when I did the axle flip in Cherry Pie, the brackets that I use for the axle flip have a hole that's 1 inch off from this hole. Now, you have to use that 1 inch hole, or 1 inch forward hole, to offset the rear end back so that your drive shaft's not too long. So what I'm gonna do is measure on this. I was just gonna enlarge this hole to fit that until I thought about it, but now that I thought about it, I need to move the rear end back that inch. I'm just gonna measure forward 1 inch, and I'll drill bigger holes 1 inch forward that'll fit down over that nut. So I'm gonna get these, I'm gonna take these over to the drill press. I'll do some measuring, I'll do some drilling, and then I'll catch back up with you guys when we're ready to start putting stuff in. All right, so as you saw, I got everything back inside. Got the rear end on top of the springs and got the springs rehung. So now everything's pretty well in place. I still got it sitting on the jack, but I got the leaf springs at full droop. So I tried to use the U-bolts off of the square body so that they wrapped around the axle and went down, but they're not gonna work. So I went back out and got the plates and the U-bolts that came off this truck, and they have this centering plate for the top of the springs. And in order for this to work right, I have to drill a hole centered 1 inch off of this hole so I can move this back as well. And it's got these little hump ridges in it, so I'm not going to be able to do that. But my question is, does it really have to have this plate? I mean, on the square bodies, the U-bolts just go around the axle and don't have anything really holding them there other than the plate that it goes through to mount on the backside. So this is squared off and all that jazz. So why would I not be able to just put it on straight on the spring and leave it that way without that plate? I don't see it being an issue. I'm gonna do a little bit of research and see if there's actually a problem with it. I don't think there will be, so I'm probably just gonna put the U-bolt straight on there and use the plate that came off the truck, and everything will be good. But like I said, I wanna research it a little bit before I do it, because if there's a reason that that plate has to be there, then I'll probably have to make a new plate to put on there, but I don't think there is. I don't think there's gonna be any problem. But I came over for a couple hours today because I wanted to make progress on this. It's the weekend, and Monday I wanted to get back on other stuff that I have to get done. This has to get done too, but it's mine, so if it doesn't, it's not as crucial as stuff I need to get done for other people. So I'm gonna call it a day. It's getting dark. I'm kinda at the point where I feel like I've done enough for today. So I'm gonna go home tomorrow. When I'm sitting at home doing nothing, I'll research and see if I need any kind of pad underneath that spring or underneath that U-bolt. And then when I get back on Monday, we'll finish this thing up. So hang tight. All right, well, I did some research on this whole situation, and I didn't really come to a conclusion. I didn't get the information I was looking for, but I put a lot of thought into it, and if this plate is on there, there's probably a reason for it. So because of the way the plate's designed with the humps and stuff in it, I can't really drill a hole an inch off because it's right in that, I don't know what you'd call it, a divot, a raise, whatever right there. And I'm not too concerned with this centering anything because all it really is just a washer for the U-bolts. So I went ahead and just ovaled out the hole so I can move it back the inch that I need to match up with everything else. And then I can just go ahead and put it on. Took my U-bolts over on the wire wheel, cleaned them all up so I got nice clean threads to start with. And it's time to get it going. Now I'm putting these U-bolts on and I'm gonna run them down, but I'm not gonna tighten them. I need them to be loose because I have to be able to pivot my rear end to get my pinion angle right. And I still have to do some measuring to make sure that I have my rear end properly centered in the truck. So I'm gonna put the U-bolts on this side, get it kind of buttoned up. I'll go over, do the same thing to the other side, get it kind of buttoned up, and then we'll start taking measurements and find out where things need to be and what we need to do and stuff like that, and then we can finish this up. Okay, so I can visually look at this and tell that my axle is not centered in the frame. I have more space over on this side between my spring plate and the backing plate than I do on this side. So I know the rear end's gonna have to go over this way. So what I'm gonna do first, sometimes different vehicles, different applications, yada, 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 the rear differential is offset. Like one axle shorter than the other one or whatever. So first thing I'm gonna do is measure from the back face of the plate that my backing plate mounts to the edge of my differential, and I've got roughly 20 1/4. So now I'm going to come over here, measure this one the exact same way, and I got roughly 20 1/4. So that tells me that my differential is centered on my axle shafts. So now what I need to do is take a measurement from my back. This is how I'm going to do it. I don't know that this is necessarily the right way, but I'm going to center my axle in the frame. So I'm going to measure from the outside of the frame to the backing plate. This side I've got 7 inches. Then I'm going to come over here, measure this side, and I've got a little over 9 inches. So I got to go an inch that way, maybe. Okay, got that moved over a little bit. Now I've got right at 8 inches to my backing plate. And I've got 8.5 on this side, so I got to go back that way about 1/4 of an inch, which that might have already been too much. Okay, so that's right about 8 1/4. And this side's right about 8 1/4. So I'm within probably a 1/16 of an inch. So I'm good with that. That's close enough. So now I want to get my jack under here a little bit better. I'm hoping I can keep my rear end up, and then I'm just gonna jack this up See, now I'm running into problems because my rear end's moving over again, but we can straighten that back out. So I'm going to jack this all the way up. Okay, so right there, that last pump, it started to lift up my frame off of my jack stands. So I know my rear end's all the way up. So that should be my ride height. Now, from what I know, once again, this is just what I know, it might not be right, but from what I know, your pinion angle should be between 3 and 10 degrees. So being able to be between 3 and 10 degrees, if I'm not at actual ride height, it's off a little bit. If I set it at 5, that gives me a little bit of variable on both sides. So that should be good. So what I'm going to do now is remeasure my axle side to side, which I already know it moved. So I just got to figure out how much I got to move it back. It really only moved about 1/4 of an inch. So okay, I got it centered back up. I got 8 1/4 on both sides. Now, just for a secondary measurement, I don't think this one's going to be accurate, but I'm going to measure from the backing plate to the inside of my E-bolt plate. A 2 3/4 on this side. I got 2 3/4 on this side, so like I said, I'm not sure if it's right, but at this very moment, I've got 2 measurements that are the same. Now, I don't have any of those new fancy digital tools or anything like this, but I've got this old angle finder. I'm going to put it on a flat spot on the rear end here. I'm going to do it the other way because it'll sit better. And then I want to set my rear end so it's between, I'm going to set it at 5, but I want it to be between 3 and 10 degrees nose up. So right now we are at about 2 degrees. So And because the jack is under it, it's not turning. So, there we go. That's going to be way too much, I think, but honestly, really not that bad. We're at about 7. So, okay, so right there, we're dead on at 5 degrees. I'm going to take my measurements here again. Still at 8 1/4. Still at 8 1/4. Might want to go that way. Just a tad. 8 1/4. We're still right on 5 degrees. Okay, so I'm going to get my welder set up, and I'm gonna, when I was tapping on the rear end to move it, it started shooting brake fluid out of my wheel cylinder, so I got to clean that up. But I'm gonna take my welder and I'm gonna get as much weld on those spring saddles or spring cups, whatever you want to call them, as I can. I can probably get underneath and weld the whole inside. I may be able to get some of the outside, but I'm going to get the points where it meets the axle on both ends. I'm going to get a good solid tack there, and then I'm going to try to weld the sides as much as I can. And that'll be enough. It will, it'll do what, it'll hold it there. It's not, by the time everything's pinched down and all that, it's not going to go anywhere. So I'm going to get that welded up real quick, and I'll show you guys the finished product. All right, I hope you guys can see this. I put good heavy tacks on both ears, and then I went ahead and welded around as much as I could, inside and out. And then I went and tightened my U-bolts all the way down. So they're tight. I'll go back and recheck them when I nut and bolt check the truck when I'm done. But for now, they're on there really good, and that should be good. And I checked my pinion angle, checked my measurements, all that stuff one more time before I welded it. And then I went back and checked it all again after I welded it in case anything moved, and nothing did. Everything's right where I wanted it, right where I left it. So I got to put weight on the truck. I'm gonna have to put the wheels on it, set it down on the ground, and take measurements, see where I'm at, you know, angle wise, if doing this brought the back end down enough to be as low as the front, or maybe I'm gonna have to go with a 1-inch drop shackle instead of 2, or see how much I need to C-notch the frame, because right now, with it jacked all the way up, I've got, I don't know, I'm just gonna roughly say 3 inches in there. And that's with the rear end jacked up to where it's lifting up the truck. But that could change when I set it down. So I'm gonna put the wheels on, we'll let the jack down, we'll take the front off the jacks, let everything sit there and settle for a minute, and then we'll take some measurements and see where we're at height-wise. All right, here we go. Time to let it down and see what we got. I'm gonna take the front off the jack stands first because they're jacked up fairly good, but I don't want to be rocking the body with them the way that they're sitting because it might fall off. So I'm gonna get the front off first, and then I'll jack the back up a little bit more, get the rear ones out, and then we'll set it down. It took a little bit of work, but we got the thing down off the jack stands. I had to block it, get the back way up, get the front down, then the back was way up, and blah, 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 blah. You probably saw most of it, but a bunch of work to do that. So we got it down, and we definitely brought the back a lot closer to where we want it. Just at a quick glance, it looks to me like the back is still a little bit higher, but we still have the bed off, which is gonna add a little bit of weight, which might bring it down a little bit more. So I'm okay with that. And if it's a little higher in the back, I'm okay with that because it gives it a little bit of a hot rod rake, and I think it'll still look pretty good. So here it is. I'm gonna try to hold you guys level so you can kind of see. Now on this truck, I don't have like a good body line to measure off of like I do on the square bodies. I'm gonna try using this one on the door. The door looks like it's on there pretty straight. We'll just measure from the ground. We're at about just 19 and an eighth. And back here we're at 19 and 3/4. Roughly, but I'm gonna go ahead and measure to the bottom of the rocker, which is about, kind of guessing 9 1/4, and about 9. So according to the door, we're off by just over 1/2 inch. I'm not good with fractions, and by the bottom of the rocker, we're off by about 1/4. Like I said, either way, the front's a little lower than the back still, and we got to put the weight of the bed on, which should level it out. So that's a big step for me. I've been putting it off, and finally just hunkered down and did it. And feels good. I'm glad it's finally done. It's a big step that I needed to get out of the way, and it's getting me that much closer to finishing this truck. So now I got all that buttoned up. I still gotta take all the old shock mounts off the frame. I got some exhaust hangers that aren't going to be used anymore, that weren't even being used when I got the truck. Take those off. I still got to snug up my spring bolts front and rear, and then I got to build my new cross member, weld my shock mounts back on the axle tubes, and then build a cross member to put my shocks back, both shocks behind the axle. Got to get a decent angle at them so they work right, and all that kind of stuff. So this video started out kind of slow. Doing the rear end, I think, was pretty cool. Like I said, I wasn't gonna do it because I just got done dropping cherry pie over here, and I didn't want to do back-to-back videos of lower on the rear end, but I needed to get this done. I film everything I do, and this one was different than that one because, for one thing, it's a different style setup, and second, this was a DIY instead of buying a kit and doing it. So she's done. I'm happy. I like it, and yeah. So I'm gonna get started doing stripping all the stuff off of the frame and getting my shock cross member built, shock mounts put back on, all that kind of stuff. And I'm not gonna C-notch this truck. So I don't really see, unless I put the bed back on and that thing's darn near sitting on the axle, I'm not putting it back on, because if it taps the frame every once in a while, if I hit a huge bump or something, I don't think it will, but that's not gonna bother me. But I've got a full 3 inches that it can travel, which is pretty dang good as far as I'm concerned. And I don't know, I might end up C-notching it. We'll see. I'm gonna put the bed on, see what kind of room I got after I put the bed on, and go from there. But when you lower these things, it takes a lot of the suspension travel out of them. They get kind of stiff. So I don't see it being that bad, but we'll see how it goes. But I'm gonna get started working on all that stuff I said I was gonna get started working on, and that's gonna be for another video on another day. So I appreciate you guys watching. If it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be able to do this. Y'all have a good one. We'll see you next time.